Hi everyone and welcome to Level of Detail, brought to you by University of Staffordshire's Games Institute. I'm Mel and today we're celebrating one of the world's most popular game franchises, Pokémon. And who better to join me than games lecturers and Pokémon superfans Jaimie, Kieran and Chris as we play Pokémon Stadium and then Pokémon Scarlet and Violet. Remember, we always love hearing from you, so please share your thoughts or ask us any questions in the comments. So let's get stuck in with Pokémon Stadium. Released on the N64 in 2000 in the UK, it is the first game to show Pokémon in 3D and allows players to upload and battle their Pokémon from the first generation games, Pokémon Red, Blue and Yellow. So Kieran, how long have you been a Pokémon fan?
So I think I've been a Pokemon fan since, was it 1996 that it came out? I've been playing it since it came out. I got a Game Boy that Christmas, and I've basically played Pokemon for every game or every mainline series that's come out. I've played them a lot, frankly. I'm not sure if I'm a super fan, but I'm a big fan.
And did you play Pokémon Stadium as soon as it came out, or did you give it a bit of time?
I did, so yeah, I had Pokémon Stadium the day it came out. I was really excited because one of the features that this game let you do is you plugged in a weird little cartridge to the back of your N64 controller, and you put in your Pokémon cart and you could grab the Pokémon that you had from the game, which meant you could have basically, this is really nerdy at this point, you had your battle IVs, which is where you kind of custom trained your Pokémon to be a little bit stronger than standard Pokemon, and I was just excited to basically bring my team in and mop the floor with the stadium.
and Jaimie, what do you love about Pokemon?
I would say it's the variety of different characters within Pokemon. There's so many different Pokemon to catch now, there's over 1,000 of them, and with each new generation that comes out I always find a new favourite to play with. My favourite part about playing a new Pokemon game is discovering those new characters, and it's been going on for pretty much my entire life, and I will continue to play each game as it comes out. I'm a massive fan.
Very cool. And I think that's shown by all this merch here that's on the table. So can you tell us a little bit more about what you've brought with you today?
Yeah, of course. So these plushies are quite significant for a few different reasons. So the main one being the Pikachu plush. I got that at the Pokémon Centre in 2019, which was a pop-up shop that basically was there to promote Pokemon Sword and Shield. So I was able to go there, play the game early, and also buy an absurd amount of merchandise, that being one of them. You can't get that one anymore, unfortunately, but at the time it was, yeah, it was really special to be able to find that. As for the other Pokemon, they are some of my favourites from across the franchise. So you've got Dragonite, Mareep, Absol, Pancham, Dratini, Excadrill, and I think that's all of them. I missed one or two of them out. Did I miss the Panda one out? Pancham? Not too sure. But yeah, those are my favourites.
Okay, very cool. And they're all quite different as well. And we know the Pokemon spans across lots of different franchises, from trading cards to the games, but the animation. And why do you think it's remained so popular over the 30 years?
So I think there's a good kind of crossover media element. I think one of the things that they've done really well with Pokemon from the beginning is regardless of what your entry point is, whether that's like if you're interested in card games or TV series or there's been a route in, and they've actually done that crossover media piece. It's an absolute case study in how to do that really well.
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting. So in the West, we kind of benefited from Pokemon already being successful in Japan. And what I meant is when it did launch in the West, the anime was already kind of ready to go. And it kind of led into that kind of cross-media, like, yeah, the anime was on Saturday mornings and the game was out, and it was kind of, you watch the anime and you go play the game and you catch those Pokemon that Ash encountered in that episode, and you kind of link that into kind of shared experience, and you go to the playground on Monday and say, oh yeah, did you see the anime on the weekend? Or did you catch whatever rare Pokemon in whatever bit of the game you're at? Or have you found Mew that's hidden under the truck, which is kind of an infamous meme amount that the old school players will probably know at least.
What about you, Jaimie? Why do you think it's been so popular over the years?
Yeah, there's many different reasons. Kind of going back to what I was saying about the variety of different creatures to collect, it is like, with there being so many of them, like, it always baffles me when someone will say this Pokemon is my favourite. There's that many Pokemon in the Pokedex that any Pokemon is probably someone's favourite. You see that a lot.
Does that mean you don't have a favourite?
I do. I have like a selection of favourites. I would say if I was going to pick one, unfortunately I don't have that one here right now, but Chimchar from Generation 4 is my favourite because that was the generation I played a lot of, Pokemon Platinum specifically. I do like Teeny as well, which Chris is so kindly demonstrating at the moment.
Yeah, I think just to jump on that point, it is interesting. So yeah, I was actually reading like a Reddit thread a couple of days ago about people's favourite Pokemon, and yeah, someone mentioned like I think it's is it Trubbish? It's like a rubbish bag Pokemon, and that's someone's favourite Pokemon. And yeah, because there's so many types, yeah, everyone has a favourite, even though it's kind of I'm judging them for having a bag of rubbish as their favourite Pokemon.
But that's amazing. I mean,
that's the beauty of it.
There was a piece of a survey, and I think that was, we might be talking about the same thing, where 1,500 players voted on their favourite Pokemon, and all of them, apart from 4, I can't remember which 4, but all of them were a favourite of somebody. But there was these 4 Pokemon that just nobody loved.
I can't think what those 4 were though. I don't think it was Trubbish in this.
No, it was.
It's more like Feebas or something.
Just imagine though being one of the only 4 unloved Pokemons. Like
of the 1,000.
Yeah, like Magikarp had quite a lot of fans.
Yeah, Magikarp was a great Pokemon.
I mean, it'd be great with some chips, but beyond that.
So Jaimie, do you want to tell us what you're doing at the moment in Pokémon Stadium?
Yeah, so currently I'm just doing one of the cups that you can do in the game, some of the single player content that's available. So in the original version you would be able to transfer Pokemon across from Pokemon Red and Blue, be able to use your team that you've leveled up in that game in Pokemon Stadium. But because I'm playing on the Nintendo Switch version, you can't actually do that, so you're allowed to create a team of your favourite Pokemon from the original 151. So I've got a few iconic Pokemon. I know it's unfair using a legendary against a Bulbasaur in this case, but I really like Zapdos, so that's why I'm using Zapdos.
Very cool. And so what do you think of the game from a design aspect, for the time it was released?
Yeah, so when it came out, it was a pretty big deal for Pokemon fans because it was the first sort of foray into 3D for the battling mechanics. So you had the spin-off Pokemon Snap and a few others, but they weren't really the same sort of gameplay style that was in the original Pokemon games. So it was really cool when you were younger, battling with friends. You were now able to take this into a 3D space as well. And some of the design ideas have kind of continued throughout. So looking at the basic 3D models, these were then iterated upon in future entries later down the line as well.
So can I be a little bit controversial here? I don't like 3D Pokemon, right? So I feel like...
I don't think that's that controversial, but go on.
Okay, so for me, if I think Pokemon, like I mean, this might be a generational thing, but if I visualise Pokemon in my head, I get that classic split screen 2D image, and like if you ever see like Pokemon, you know, where people have used the battling meme, it goes
that same UI kind of interface.
yeah,
okay.
And for me, that is so iconic that I almost feel like I lose something going into the 3D space. The old maps, that kind of I call it Zelda-esque, but that kind of top-down navigation, the surprise mechanic, and I think it was one of the first games that really did that surprise mechanic in that kind of design really, really well. The fact that you'd just be walking along and poof, there's a Pokemon, and sometimes it's somebody you can capture, and sometimes it massively outweighs you, and I really enjoyed that. I think when it went to 3D, because obviously the graphics for the time were excellent, but it actually felt artistically like a step backwards. It's because it's all so low poly, whereas you kind of know what you're getting with the 2D.
Yeah, so it's not an uncommon sentiment, and I'm sure Jaimie would have kind of had some feelings around, like, as we've gone through the generations and they've done revisions to the 3D models, sometimes they move a little bit further away than kind of what fans might expect. But I think like there's a bunch of 3D models of the Pokemon that I'm like, oh, I just don't like how that looks. But I look at the sprite and I'm like, oh, that's a really nice, sprite work.
Yeah.
But I have the flip where there's a few sprites, particularly in the first generation, that look really dorky and just don't look particularly cool. And then when you see them in 3D, they sort of look, they look more alive, more interesting. But I think one of the things that kind of stood out to me when I was playing this as a kid was seeing Charizard in 2D, you don't quite get the size of that Pokemon, you don't quite get the depth and the actual how Charizard looks in a 3D environment. Whereas when you see, obviously we've got Dragonite here rather than Charizard, but when you see that in 3D, it was quite impressive to child me. I was like, wow, look how big that Pokemon is. Or in the case of like Abra, look how small that Pokemon is. Because that information was there in the Pokedex, but it's not particularly. You can't really visualize that very well.
Do you think that innovation with the design of the Pokemon has continued as they've added more to the number of them that there are?
Oh, that is a hot topic.
I would say it's increased.
Okay.
And the reason I would say it's increased, I think the first 150 or 151, depending on how you want to count them, but I think they picked a bunch of characters because they made mechanic sense, right? You know, there was good balancing between the types and styles and things like that. Now, as they've gone on, I think there's a bit more blending of those mechanics, and to the point where that some of the classic, use this type against this type, kind of becomes a little bit less important in some cases. But what's really nice is the more thematic design elements, that they're trying to replicate certain cultural artifacts or some, regionalities and things like that. And I think that's quite a nice evolution. I think it's not to keep 1,000 and still keep it feeling relatively fresh. I think it's quite impressive.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. So I think they do a really good job. So most of the mainline series Pokemon games, they pick somewhere in the world and kind of use that as inspiration for the environment. So Scarlet and Violet were based on Spain to some extent. And so you see kind of that Spanish influence in some of the Pokemon. And I think those Pokemon typically are really well designed and are normally received quite well by the community. But there's always this kind of interesting discourse online around some Pokemon, like the Trubbish, just to kind of throw them under the bus one more time. It's just a rubbish bag. But I think even some of the original 151 have that same issue. Right? Muck is just some slime.
Yeah.
Right, it's just a pool of something.
I think those are always the Pokemon I had like the biggest trouble kind of connecting with. Like, you take
slime.
You're talking about that really early on when you had Bulbasaur versus was that Zapdos?
Yeah, Zapdos. Yeah.
So for me, that's Big Bird from Sesame Street, right? And no one's convincing me otherwise. Whereas you take something like, our little friend Pikachu here, it was that's so iconic. Like the kind of design language that's coming through that character is so impressive. Whereas with it's just a bird and this fella here, this is just a panda. Like, no one's convincing me this isn't just a panda, right? And
Panda.
That's one of the things that I find quite juxtaposed about whatever the kind of design Bible is with Pokemon, is that sometimes you have, like, it's just a bag of rubbish.
Yeah, as well as the key, or like a key ring.
Yeah, and, there's like Muck, and like Farfetch'd is just a duck, like, and
with
then you have but then you have things like Pikachu and Dragonite and like they just seem to be like, it's almost like two separate people were in charge of designing the Pokemon and they never really had a conversation. Like there's but yet I say that, but yet it all seems to be
it's cohesive.
Yeah, it's like it's got contextual consistency within that narrative.
Great.
So I'm just going to touch on something around Pokémon Stadium, just because it came to mind whilst Jaimie's been playing through the battles. So one of the things, as a kid, when I first played Pokémon Stadium, I was hoping for a bit more of an exploratory game. Right, I just played Pokemon Red and Blue and wanted to explore the world of Pokemon, and this was just a fighting game. And initially, a little bit disappointed at that. However, because it was just a fighting game, or just it was just the turn-based battling game from the mainline series, it made me actually grow a quite deep appreciation for their battle system and the depth that exists there in the type-ins and in the movesets and in how you kind of balance that out. That has translated to why I now love the card game so much, because it has a similar kind of battle system. I think it's interesting.
I mean, that's, again, you were talking about earlier about why Pokemon's been so successful, and I'm curious now, like, what is your primary driver for playing? You know, we sometimes talk about, you know, the kind of classic playstyle definitions as you know, I don't know whether you use those in your research or anymore, but they're an interesting way of describing the reasons why people play a game. For me, I'm very similar. I like Pokemon for the exploration. I like it for the kind of hunting mechanic, the capturing mechanic. I always found when you actually got to like a gym battle, and that's the bit I kind of wanted to rush through and kind of get over with, because I wanted to go back to that, going out into the wilderness and capturing Pokemon. And I'm wondering, what was your favourite part?
Yeah, so I like how the design of Pokemon kind of facilitates those different play styles. For me, it's actually a bit more of a very specific feature that was introduced more so in Generation 2 onwards, was the shiny hunting sort of thing, where I could go out my way and get a rare version of a certain Pokemon. It was an alternate colour palette, but it still felt like I went on an adventure to try and find that Pokemon. And as the games have gone on, they've started to facilitate that particular style of play a little bit more. Especially in Scarlet and Violet, there's like 4 different ways of getting shiny Pokemon now, which is really cool. But yeah, that's definitely my favourite. And then I used to play competitive battling as well, so I was really into that sort of side.
So now we're going to play Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Released in 2022 on the Switch, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet are the first fully 3D open-world games with a non-linear structure, following experimentation in Sword and Shield and Legends Arceus. And what do you think about Pokemon's transition to this non-linear style of gaming?
I love it. So I love it because, for me, it kind of fulfills the promise of what Pokemon always should have been. And even if you go back really to, you know, Red and Blue, where I kind of cut my teeth, there were still non-linear elements. Within a linear structure, there was non-linear elements. And I think there's been a big push towards a lot more non-linear gameplay just across the sector generally. But with something like Pokemon, where you have a really established world, a really established lore, you have people who are invested and want to feel like they are legitimate Pokemon trainers, for me, that open world format is the only way that you can really achieve that.
Yeah, so as always, I'm going to be controversial with my opinion, and I'm mixed, right? I'm ambivalent when it comes to how I feel about the kind of change that the Violet and Scarlet had. So there's aspects of it being open world that I absolutely love. Starting the game, doing a bit of tutorialization, and then going wherever you feel like. That I really love. But there are some aspects, so like the gym battles, there's something about having a journey where you know you've got to do the water gym and then you've got to go and do the grass gym in a sequential order, and it kind of has that linear storytelling. I think I was missing that a little bit in this version of the game, and because of its open world nature, you didn't necessarily have the same shared experience with your friends. So you had different stories to tell, but I quite liked, again, when I was playing through the more linear ones, talking about, you know, oh yeah, I've just managed to beat this gym, how did you manage it? Well, that doesn't kind of happen in this one, because everyone approaches those gyms at different points, at different power spikes. That, yeah, I miss the linear aspect, but I absolutely love being able to go where I want. That's my favourite thing in any game.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? And again, this might be the people who started Pokemon with the very first kind of anime series. There was a very linear journey. You know, you were walking. It's the Yellow Brick Road metaphor, right? You started in and you trundled down that road, and it felt every episode like you were getting further and further away from home and safety, and it was becoming more and more feral, and that there was and I would agree. I think you lose a little bit of, because something that kind of annoys me about open world game design, and it's one of those things that annoys me, but as a designer, but players seem to like, is fast travel. Like, I want to feel like things should take time. Like, if I'm walking between villages, that should be part of the...
You know, the journey.
Yeah.
Between those two places.
They should feel like there's an element of peril. It's like... Yeah, and it's funny because Jaimie's on the bike, this is one of the few things that annoys me about this game. I don't want that. I want to feel like I'm 10-year-old Ash.
You should play Legends.
Yeah, there's an element to that. I think the game is just beautifully done. And like I say, for me, I really love it. I think it fulfills the promise of what Pokemon always could be. But I like you, I think there's a slight missing of that narrative development.
Yeah.
What about you, Jaimie, as you're playing this? So does this bring back fond memories from 2 years ago?
Yeah, for me, I do like the carve your own adventure sort of style that this game went for. One thing that I felt a little bit disappointed by with Scarlet and Violet was following on from Legends Arceus, which was sort of the first proper sort of, well, Sword and Shield tried to do a bit of open world stuff, but that game kind of leaned more heavily into an open world sort of style. I liked that when you encountered a Pokemon, it did feel like a challenge, like they could attack you, and let's say you ran into like a giant Pokemon, it would feel intimidating, like you are fighting a foe. There is some elements of that in this, but you don't really get the same sort of response from encountering a massive Pokemon, for instance. Like, some of my fondest memories playing Legends Arceus were running into like an Electivire that's really, really tall and has red glowing eyes that starts chasing me, whereas you don't really get that in this one.
It's missing the fear.
Yeah.
And that fear's in the anime as well, right? There's instances where Ash, kind of gets beaten up by the Pokemon that you don't get in any of these kind of experiences. But Arceus did have that, and I really did like that part of that game.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's going back to what you said about the anime. Like, one of my earliest memories of the anime is that scene with the Onyx, where he runs into an Onyx and it starts chasing him.
Yeah.
And it's like this giant sort of action-packed scene. Like, you do have elements of that in this game, but I'm hoping with Legends ZA and the next generation that I really hope they lean more into that again, because it really worked in that game.
It's that sense of peril versus petting zoo, isn't it, right? You want to feel like there's that element of danger. And I think, like I say, with a linear narrative, you set that danger level and you just amp up as you amp up in your skill. Whereas, obviously, the trade-off for an open world game is you could go anywhere at any time, and you don't...
You can't guarantee the player's going to encounter that in the same way.
But yeah, like you, I miss that bit of peril.
Yeah. But you look at that and you're like, wow, look, you can go and climb to the top of that mountain.
Absolutely.
And that I love. And hopefully there'll be something up there, which there is in most instances in this game. They've got quite a good kind of design sense of putting things to collect where players are likely to say, hey, I want to go climb up the mountain, or I wonder what's in this crevice.
So we've talked a little bit about the trading card game in this episode, but Kieran, you've also been playing the new mobile game, so what do you think of it?
Yeah, so I've put a potentially ungodly amount of time into the mobile game since it's come out. It came out just before Christmas, and it's quickly become one of those things that anytime I've got a spare 5 minutes, I open it up and basically have a quick battle. So it's basically a digital version of the trading card game. But what they've done, so it has a battle system, and you collect the cards, and so it still has that kind of motivational pull of wanting to collect the cards, and that's what drew me in, because I like to collect shiny things. But then it's got a slightly revised battle system, so it follows how the trading card battle system works, but they've streamlined it a bit down so it kind of fits into mobile gameplay, so matches take around kind of 3 to 5 minutes. And so I found that just means that I really want to spend, when I've got a spare 5 minutes, have a quick battle and test out new decks and kind of new build strategies to kind of counter other players, and I just love that aspect of it.
Cool. Has anyone else played the mobile game?
I downloaded it and I started to play it. The card game has never really been my sort of interest in Pokemon. I have dabbled with it in the past, more from a collecting standpoint. I do really think if you are trying to get into the TCG, it is a very nice gateway for it. Like, I've got a friend who's never touched the trading card game before, and through that he's been able to learn how to play the trading card game, so then he started collecting the cards and is actually playing it now. So I think from that perspective it's really good. But for me, card games are something I don't really vibe with all that much, to be honest. So I do respect it though. I think it's a really good hobby to have, I would say.
Talking of new games, Pokemon ZA is due to be released this year. So what do you think that we can expect with this release?
It's interesting, that one, because not much is known about it. We only have very few details about what it's going to sort of entail. So we know that it's based on Pokemon X and Y. So the reason why it's got the Z in the name is because they never released Pokemon Z version, which was rumoured for years. So they have taken the Legends sort of franchise that they started to establish with Arceus and are going back to tell that story that wasn't really told back then. So all we know at the moment is that it's going to take place entirely in one location, being Lomeo City. So I'm really curious how they're going to take the design of Legends and put that into just one location. Whereas in Legends Arceus you had multiple different zones you could go to. So I wonder if they're going to take districts or, I don't know, some sort of approach where there's like different zones within that giant city, because hardware limitations restricted what they could do on the 3DS. Whereas with the Switch, and hopefully the Switch 2 later this year, there'll be a lot more potential for them to really dig into that area a little bit more.
Do you get the feeling, though, that I think with Pokemon, I felt certainly with this game and obviously changes in the anime, like there's been recognition that their original player base is kind of on, not, I wouldn't say aging out, but certainly the anime got to a point where it was quite a hard entry point, because there was so many years of lore that people had to kind of catch up on to figure out where Ash was. And I think they got to the point where, right, we just need to get rid of this character, start fresh. And it feels like the games are sort of doing that as well. I feel like, you know, we're talking about from Legends to this. This feels, again, disagree with me if I'm wrong, but it almost feels like this is aimed at a younger audience.
Oh, you reckon?
Yeah, that's the feeling I got, and I kind of wondered whether, okay, with the kind of going through this whole player base reset, snap up expand and bring in a new audience as old timers like us, have less time to play. And I wonder whether what we're going to see with the next release is effectively, you know, what the gold and silver was to red and blue.
I hope so. As someone that loved gold and silver, if they've got the equivalent of the love and effort that went into that game in the new Legends game, I'd be very excited. I think so. Like, Legends Arceus was very much, you could tell they were experimenting with the Pokemon format, but they didn't want to do it in the form of their mainline games for fear that it wasn't kind of positively received. When it was quite well received, we then saw Scarlet and Violet take a bunch of the different design lessons they learned and apply them. What I hope to see from the next Legends one is basically them experiment even further, right? I want to see them really go a little bit crazy with what a Pokemon game can be, because we've not really had anything that breaks the mold of what a Pokemon experience is. Even Arceus still follows some fairly typical beats of a Pokemon experience. I want to see some stuff like the dungeon games that were basically Pokemon roguelikes before that was a thing, or before it was a common thing at least. Right? I want to see something, I don't know, crazy. And the cityscape might be the thing that does that.
Cooking mechanics.
They've had cooking mechanics before with Pokeblocks.
You can also make sandwiches in Scarlet and Violet.
Yeah, you can, that's true.
Yeah.
But not out of the Pokemon.
No, not out of the Pokemon. But it's in Legends Arceus, if I remember rightly, there was like Pokemon ingredients like scattered around.
Yeah,
like when you would pick up things, it would come up saying like, I don't know, Tuft of Bulbasaur. I'm not saying Bulbasaur has hair, but like
Tuft of Bulbasaur.
Tuft of Bulbasaur.
Yeah, things like that. There were like those little items out in the world, so maybe they'll use that a little bit more. So that'll be interesting.
So we've talked a lot about Pokemon today, and there are over 1,000 Pokemon. So if you could be a Pokemon, which one would you be and why?
That's a really difficult question. It depends on what kind of vibe I'm trying to go for. I would say, like, if I'm looking at a Pokemon that's just like really chill and just having a great time, I really like the Pokemon Emolga from Generation 5, because in the anime it's just a Pokemon that goes around just gliding around, just having a nice time. It's really cute. It's one of the Pikachu clones, but I really like. I don't know, it's got a certain aura about it that I really like.
I think so. It's one of, like, we spoke earlier around kind of, you know, favorite Pokemon and Pokemon you like, and it's tricky to kind of pick one. And even with this question, like, oh, there's a lot of Pokemon I'd like to be. I'll go with Gengar, mainly because Gengar can fly. As a ghost, can go through stuff, but can also possess things. I think I can have quite a lot of fun as a Gengar, effectively, and that's what I'm after if I'm turning into a Pokemon.
I think just for pure. How long have I got to be this Pokemon? Is it like a Pokemon for a day?
Forever.
Yeah, forever.
Oh, see, if I'm going to be a Pokemon forever, I'm going to be like a Diglett or something, just so I can avoid people, just make myself a nice little hole and escape. I think
If you evolve though, there's gonna be 3 of you.
Oh no. I mean, Mew's a really basic answer because that's just. But if it was just for a day and I could just kind of mess with people a bit, Mr. Mime.
I was close to saying Mr. Mime for the record.
Like, I feel like I could have a lot of fun as a Mr. Mime, just creating absolute
Chaos.
havoc.
Chaotic. I just think of the Mr. Mime from the Detective Pikachu movie that's like having pranking the 2 characters where he's like on a bike and he's trying to. It's just, yeah, you could have a lot of mischief. Like, you speaking about that sort of angle has made me think of something I didn't think of originally. Like, you should be Arceus, should be God then.
I'm going to rule out legendary Pokemon
you'll
as
be a
options.
legendary Pokemon.
It's no fun if you can be just like in competitive battles. It's no fun if you've got the legendary Pokemon.
It's fair to say, though, I wouldn't be this guy. Because this guy is just a panda bear.
You're not wrong.
Like, it's just a panda bear.
Funny.
We hope you've had fun with us today. Thanks again to Jaimie, Chris and Kieran for joining. And I feel like I know a lot more about Pokemon now. And remember that you can check out loads of other episodes of Level of Detail on our YouTube channel. And thanks for joining us, and bye.